Local programming on KRWG made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Fronteras, to Changing America. I'm Anthony Moreno. Our guest today recently concluded a program that you heard every weekday right here on KRWG-FM, New Mexico Mile Markers. Here to share some memories of their travels around the state are Cheryl Fallstead and Bud Russo. Thank you both for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Now, we were able to hear on KRWG-FM every weekday the many travels you had, but I'd like to start off this interview talking about the travels that you had before you really came to New Mexico or came back to the state.
The travels where we were before we came to New Mexico, well, I'm a native Californian, and I had never been to New Mexico until we came to check it out to move here. So most of my travel was around the state, the Golden State, and other family trips, but I had never had the opportunity to see what New Mexico had to offer. And when we decided to move here, everything was new to us, so that was really exciting. But on the other hand, came from the other side of the country.
Yeah, I was born in Baltimore, and when it came time to go to college, I found New Mexico State University. I was going to be a nuclear physicist and discovered I could walk through walls easier than do calculus. I took a writing course and discovered I could write, and I loved it more than anything I'd ever done. So I got a degree in journalism here. Went out in the world to make my mark and spent 40 years doing industrial journalism, writing about manufacturing, and a career that took me around the world. So when I retired, I decided to find the sunshine and came back to what is now my home.
Could you speak with us a little bit about the genesis of New Mexico Mile Markers? What was really the idea behind it? How did it come about? And how did you two meet?
Well, it's kind of funny because when I moved here, I have a journalism degree as well, but I had ended up working in a variety of fields such as agricultural safety, working for the California Farm Bureau, and then I went into education. When we moved here, I told my husband I'm going to focus on my freelance writing and I'm going to do some maybe part-time teaching for the community college and volunteer. Turns out I've done all three of those things. One of the jobs, the freelance jobs I got fairly quickly was being editor of Southwest Senior newspaper. I met Bud when we were both volunteering on the board for the Foundation for Las Cruces Museums. I found out he was a writer, I was an editor. He started writing travel articles for Southwest Senior. And eventually his travel articles were so popular, our publisher, Keith Welpley, who had a radio show, asked if Bud wanted to do a radio show about traveling in New Mexico.
It was supposed to be 1 hour on Keith's show every other week. And the station owner said, no, my Tuesday evenings are open. I want you to do Explore New Mexico for 2 hours every Tuesday. And I was spending 30 to 40 hours a week just to prepare to do a 2-hour radio show. And after about 6 weeks, I thought, I can't do this by myself. So I asked Cheryl if she would like to join me and be a co-host. She wanted to travel and write, I wanted to travel and write, and we have discovered New Mexico together that way.
So for, 2 years?
2 years.
We did a show on an AM station, and it was 2 hours once a week. We started doing it with guests coming in, but because it's a travel show, we wanted to bring New Mexico to our listeners. So it became more and more where we would go to places and record interviews and record what we saw and come home and produce these stories. After 2 years of doing that, we went off the radio for a little while and then came up with the idea of, well, what if we did these little 2-minute segments and got them on public radio around the state? So our business plan was to provide them free to the radio stations and find sponsorships. And the radio stations was a little bit easier than finding the sponsors. So we did that for 3 years. We did the mile markers for 3 years and had a really good time. But again, it was a lot of time and work to do something that wasn't really paying off financially.
It was artistically successful. It fulfilled the desire to travel and meet people, but financially it never quite made the mark.
Well, take me into what it takes to really produce, a weekday program, just, for those 2 minutes that you had every day.
I can't say how much time Cheryl spent writing stories. It would take me anywhere from, if it was an easy story, I could do it in an hour. If I had to struggle with it and try to put the pieces together, and usually that was because there was far more material than you can do in a 2-minute segment, it could take 3 or 4 hours. And then we would meet every Thursday morning. We would rehearse the stories that we picked for the next broadcast, which was 2 weeks out. Then we'd record, and then I would do the editing. I'd take the voice file and make it nice and clean and mix it on our music bed. And that would, I guess, 4 or 5 hours a week for each story. We did 5 a week.
And with a few exceptions where we did maybe some holiday repeats, it was a new story every weekday. So we wrote and produced over 800 New Mexico mile markers over the 3 years. And when you're trying to come up with something original that's going to make people say, I didn't know that, for every weekday of the year, that's a lot of research and digging. And we would love to say that we traveled to every place that we did a story about. Unfortunately, there was not time or money to do that. So a lot of this was reading books and doing online research and talking to a friend of a friend of a friend and trying to find interesting stories. And then when we were able to, we did actually get to go and travel and discover things in person.
Let's talk about your travels. When did you first take off on the road, and what were some of the first experiences like when you're on the road and gaining the information and covering these stories that you're ready to produce?
Well, I have to say honestly that I have a wanderlust. When I came here, I started solo hikes in the desert, and I still do that. And Cheryl insists that I email her or call her before I go, and then let her know when I get home, so I'm not stuck out in the desert somewhere. And that's a good friend who will do that for you. And so I would take off. Say, I went to Socorro. I want to see what's in Socorro, and I found all of the historic buildings and did a walk around town. I went to the museums. I found some neat restaurants to eat in, and not only did I do mile markers from that, but that also produced stories for Southwest Senior. So that would be something I would do on my own, and I don't know, they'll do that once a month. Then there were trips that Cheryl and I planned with her husband along, where we would go away for anywhere for a weekend to 5 days.
We've been to places like Chaco Canyon and camped there and explored the different ruins and trying to learn more about the history. And Chaco is one of Bud's favorite places that we've been to. In fact, all 3 of us, my husband and Bud and I, really felt a strong connection there because there's so much mystery to it still. People were there so long ago for their own reasons that we can't quite understand. So that was one of our favorite places to go. But I'm thinking early on when we were doing the 2-hour radio show, we would go to places like either Albuquerque or Santa Fe, and over a weekend maybe go to 6 museums and different locations and interview people and do hours of radio shows out of one weekend. So other friends would go. If my husband couldn't go, sometimes a couple of different friends would go with us, and we lovingly refer to them as our Sherpas because they got to carry stuff and be I need my camera now, no, now I need the microphone, now I need the tablet. So that we would have an extra pair of hands or 2. But they would laugh and say, is this going to be another Cheryl weekend? Because we would squeeze so much in. We're thinking if we're going to go all the way up there, we want to get as many stories out of this as we can. So Santa Fe and Albuquerque, we spent a lot of time in the Four Corners area this year. We were working with the radio station up there and the Connie Gotch Arts Foundation. And Connie Gotch was a friend of ours through the New Mexico Presswomen, and she worked with a public radio station in Farmington, and I've just forgotten their call letters.
KSJE.
Thank you, because it's San Juan County, thank you, KSJE. And when she died a couple years ago, she left her estate to create this arts foundation and support the arts up in San Juan County. So we went up there and fell in love with Farmington. We had driven by, but we'd never really delved into Farmington. And I have to say, if you haven't been, And the person who was telling me where to go and what to see said, don't miss the library. And I said, okay, sure, I'll make a note, library. Don't miss the library. They have an outstanding library there. It's gorgeous. And they have art, they have kachinas, they have not solar eclipse lines, but the solar solstice lines on the floor. It's an amazing library. They have a beautiful river walk that goes miles and miles along the river. They have 3 rivers up there. So Farmington was a surprise to us, how much we would enjoy it and like it. I'm trying to remember what else it was. There was one more thing in Farmington. Oh, the Sandstone Productions Theater. They have an outdoor theater that is in the sandstone foothills, and the stage is the sandstone, and they put on performances there each year. So we were just really wowed by Farmington. You know, you expect to go to some place like Taos or Abiquiu or Santa Fe and find really cool things, and we were really impressed with what you would see in Farmington and the Four Corners area.
She missed a key point in the library.
Oh, yes.
There are 2 artists who hand-carved 2 doors that must be 6 feet tall by 4 feet wide for the children's reading room. And it is a door that starts once upon a time, and there are dragons and sailing ships and castles and frogs and all sorts of creatures. And the first line of 23, 24 favorite children's books, all hand lettered in this door. And the door opens so that when it's fully open, it looks like a book. So when you close the doors, you have the pages of the book. And that's what children see when they go in to the reading center. That's their inspiration.
Yeah, how could I have forgotten that? So yeah, that library was really great. And we met the artist, she and her husband, who made these doors, and she owns an art gallery up there. So Farmington was an awesome place that we went. One of Bud's favorite places that he went was Victory Ranch.
Oh yes. I did a weekend in Mora Valley, and Victory Ranch is an alpaca ranch. So I wanted to do that, and I went to Solomon Ranch where they raised raspberries, and I went to the Cleveland Roller Mill. And so I had all these things in Mora, and so I called Carol Weisner, who owns Victory Ranch, and I told her what I wanted to do, and I told her when I wanted to be there. And she said, well, where are you staying? I said, well, I'm probably going to get a hotel in Las Vegas. That's 30 miles away. And she says, no, we have a guest house. You can stay with us. This woman has never met me before. And she says, come and stay at our guest house. So I get there, I'm at the guest house, and it's dinner time. She says, come on, you're having dinner with us in their home with her daughter, with the other people who worked at the ranch. And then she said, breakfast tomorrow morning is at 6 a.m. if you're going to be out with the alpacas. So I joined them for breakfast. She just included me in her family, a guy she had never met before. And I have been impressed with New Mexicans who do that. There are no curmudgeons in New Mexico.
Is that really, one of the most special things that you enjoyed with this experience was the people?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. New Mexicans are friendly people. They open their homes to you. They open their hearts to you when they tell you stories. It's just an incredible experience.
Well, and one of my favorite events in New Mexico is the Santa Fe International Folk Art Market. And we meet people from all over the world there. Santa Fe basically opens their home and hearts to artists from all over the world to come and sell their art. And at this event, they make more money than they would in years, if not ever. And they go home and they help support their families and their villages and their communities. So I've been, several times to the folk art market and met not only people from New Mexico there to purchase at this event, but people from all over the world who are so happy to be there. And imagine how overwhelming it would be for your first time to be there with thousands and thousands of people pressing in and wanting to see your art. And you have a translator there to help you to discuss it. It's a great event.
Yeah, I know there's thousands of people that attend that event every year, isn't there?
And the last numbers, if I remember correctly, the artist netted $2 million. That's what they took home with them. Now there are 400 or 500 artists there.
I can't remember the numbers, but yeah.
There are 150 nations represented. And so these artists take this money home. That, in some cases, is the money they earn in that one weekend that they live on for an entire year. And their art is incredible.
And it's like traveling the world in one little place. It's up on Museum Hill, and the whole place is packed with booths for this event. Another event that we visited for the first time this year was the Gathering of Nations, and that's where our native people come and they do dances and they sell arts and crafts. And we had a really good time. I did my photojournalist thing. I was just down on the edge of the floor there for, I don't know, 2 hours trying to take pictures of the dances and to get a feel for some of that pride that they have with this opportunity to come in and show off what they've been learning with their dances and their costumes that they've been creating. So that was a new event, a new adventure for us this year when we were up in the Albuquerque area this year.
You mentioned there's so many things to explore here in this state with just a little bit over 2 million people, but a lot of people don't realize exactly how big this state is. And was that really something that, surprised you when you're out there on the road, traveling all over the place?
Absolutely.
What surprises me is friends from Wisconsin, where I spent 20 years, will come down to visit and say, can we go to Albuquerque tomorrow? And I say to them, it's a 7-hour round trip. Or you want to invest that much time driving? They have no perspective that our state is 300 miles wide and 350 miles north to south, and it's the 5th largest state in the nation. It's a huge piece of real estate.
We just had visitors from Washington, and we had kind of piddled the morning away, and we had just the afternoon left, and she says at this time, oh, you left that brochure out about the Apache Point Observatory. How about we go there now? And I said, we have to be someplace at 5 this afternoon. It's going to take, we have to drive to Alamogordo, we have to go up to Cloudcroft, we have to go to Sunspot and Apache Point. And no, we don't have time to do that. She goes, oh, I thought it was about 20 minutes away. No, it's quite a distance.
Over 100 miles.
I mean, I try to tell people, really from where we are in Las Cruces, if you want to go to the next town, it's really an hour in any direction. You're going to go an hour to Alamogordo, an hour to Deming, an hour to Lordsburg from there. Things aren't packed together like they are, say, in California. So, yes, and if we wanted to go explore someplace for one of our stories, we really had to budget both the time and the money to be able to get to someplace like Farmington's a good 7-hour drive.
Yeah.
And so you don't just dash up there in a day. Our last trip, we had a New Mexico Presswoman board meeting in Albuquerque. So we went to Farmington and went to the play at the Sandstone Productions and did a few other things over there. And then we went to the Gathering of Nations, and then we went to our meeting. We tried to get as much into one of those Cheryl weekends as we can by maximizing our experiences while we're out on the road. But yeah, it'd be nice if things were a little more compact so we could see more in a weekend.
Well, doing this, what did you learn about, tourism, the business of tourism, and how many different tourist places there are to visit, whether it's cultural, agricultural? I mean, it seems like there's a lot of diversity here within the state in that. And I was, as I listened to your program, I noticed that you covered really all areas of that, it seemed like throughout the week.
There are an incredible number of hidden treasures in this state. If you are interested in history, for example, we drive from here to, say, Ruidoso and go right past Tularosa. Well, the highway just skirts the town. And I have yet to be there. You got to get off the main road. There are about 16 blocks of historic buildings that have been there since the town was founded. And I've got to go get in there and walk around and talk to people about their homes and just absorb the history. That's a neat little treasure. White Oaks is up in the mountains north of Carrizozo, and you can't go from point A to point B in White Oaks without running into interesting people. Unfortunately, they're all deceased.
Well, probably not all of them.
Not all of them, but the ones I met who are still alive are interesting, but the historical stories. There's Susan McSween Barber. Her husband was the McSween in the Lincoln County War. the guy who found the gold mine in White Oaks. In the cemetery, all the headstones are facing one direction. His is 90 degrees turned. And there's a reason why. He faces the gold mine. He wanted to make sure that nobody was going to sneak in and take his gold. So when they buried him, they put his headstone, they buried him the other way. So I guess we bury people so that when the day of resurrection comes in, you sit up out of your tomb. You're facing the east. Well, he sits up, he's facing his gold mine.
He's got his priorities, I guess.
Well, I guess so. I think that also probably would lead to some interesting stories growing up in that area, you know, hearing from your folks. What are some of your favorite stories, your favorite productions that you put on from around the state? I'd like to hear from both of you on this.
Now, one of the ones that I'm thinking of is we went to Otero Mesa with the Southwest Environmental Center, I think. It was a camping trip, and this is an area that they're trying to preserve. And we met Steve West, and he's a biologist who was doing bird counts there at Otero Mesa. So we spent the day with him going to water tank, counting birds, and talking to him. Found out that he has spent the last 20 plus summers at Carlsbad Caverns studying the cave swallows. When we think of Carlsbad Caverns, we think of bats. Cave swallows also live there during the summer, in the mouth of the big entrance. And he goes with groups of volunteers and a couple of other regular assistants, put up big nets at the entrance. The cave swallows are flying in and out, getting food to feed their young. And we trap them in the nets and take them, band them, measure them. Steve has been doing this for years. So meeting him at Otero Mesa led to us going to Carlsbad and participating in his cave swallow banding project. And I have to tell you, anybody who's watching, if you're in Carlsbad and you're interested in doing this, he does it every week in the summer, and they are desperately short of volunteers. And the really cool thing you get to do after you get to do all this cave swallow banding is, as it's becoming dusk and the swallows are going to stay in their nest and the bats are coming out, we drop the nets and you sit very quietly on the edge and you get to watch the bats come out of the cave from inside the cave. And so you're sitting there and they're just swirling right in front of you, going out to go feed for the evening. So that was one of my favorite experiences that just kind of was serendipitous. And there were a lot of serendipitous moments that we met somebody. I was in Santa Fe, went to a performance of Messiah. The person I ended up sitting next to was Nancy Hunter Warren, who used to be the photographer for the museums and for the state, and has written multiple books with her photography of pueblos and Santa Fe. We just happened to be sitting next to each other, started talking, found out she was a photographer, I'm a photographer. She has done all these books, and she is sadly blind now, so she can no longer do photography. But she was just this wonderful person to meet because I just happened to sit next to her. So you never know who you're going to meet or what your next exciting adventure is going to be.
Well, you put me on the spot now. How to pick one out of the many?
Well, mention Spaceport because we have a lovely photo of that.
Okay. Part of wanting to be a nuclear physicist is that as a child I was going to be the first man on the moon, and obviously that didn't happen. But I've had a lifelong interest in space flight, and so when I first came here and there's the spaceport sign, I wanted to find out what it was and write stories about it. So Cheryl and I have been to the spaceport 3 times now. We were there for the runway dedication, and the Governor Richardson was there, Sir Richard Branson was there, Buzz Aldrin was there, and a bunch of other notaries whose names I can't remember. So Branson has his spaceship land, and then they do a press conference, and I'm thinking, he has spent $500 million, and I know he wants to do more than give rich people joy rides. So at the press conference, I raised my hand. You know, there we are with all of the big publications, and Bud Russo from Southwest Senior, you know, a little county paper in southern New Mexico, and I asked Sir Richard how long it would take before he had orbital capability. And his answer, while technical, basically said, give me a couple of years. He now has a device he calls Launcher One. He can put small satellites into orbit, and he probably has on the drawing pads his next craft that will take people into orbit. I'm so impressed with that I'm trying to get assignments to do stories leading up to his flight, hopefully this August. And I want to interview some leaders in the field who will be operating out of the spaceport to try to give people a perspective of what is it going to be like here 20 years from now.
That'll be interesting. And we only have just a little bit over a minute left. I was wondering if you could share with us maybe what's next.
Well, we're talking about that. We spent 3 years doing the mile markers. We have a lot of resources and information. When we announced on our Facebook page that we were wrapping up our radio shows, there were some outcry from fans, which was nice, instead of everybody just ignoring us that we were gone. And so there's been some interest in us making a book or putting together compilations of CDs. So we're not sure. We're going to take a little breather, and then we'll get together and talk about what we think would be the best route for any future endeavors, if there are any.
When you have 800 stories, you don't want to just put them aside and forget them. There's a wealth of material that people can continue to enjoy.
But we both want to be working on freelance writing too, so they may come out that way as well.
Well, we'll look forward to see what's next for you both. So thank you very much for joining us and sharing your memories.
Thank
Thank you.
Our guests were Bud Russo and Cheryl Fallstead from New Mexico Mile Markers. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm Anthony Moreno. This is Fronteras, a Changing America.